So now that we've created our doc, there's several things that we should get our head around. One is understanding what the hell layers mean, and this is where we usually keep all our layers. And then there's a few tools here that I want to teach you about. I want to teach you about the Paint Bucket tool, which we probably might know a little bit about. Our text tool, which is currently selected. Our rectangular tool, which is here. Our pen tool. Where is that? Where's our pen tool gone? I can see it somewhere. There it is. Our pen tool. And then we have a curvature tool, which is inside here. And then our rubber. Oh, and our paintbrush, which I think is also important. I'm intentionally going for these ones because these are good ones to start off with. Later on, I'll probably teach you a little bit more about how to use Photoshop. But for today, I think this is a good start. So, first things first is our paint bucket tool. So if we want to change the colour of our background, for example, what we would do is first of all, we'll click on our paint bucket. If we want to choose the colour for our paint bucket, we can do it down here. So we've got two swatches at the moment. We've got a blue and a white. If I click this arrow, I can choose which one's in front, which one's in back. Whatever is in front is the one that's being in use. The one at the back is the one we've sort of saved for later. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to pick this nice blue colour and press OK. I'm going to click on my bucket, and then I'm going to press my background surface, and it's nice and blue now. Once I've done that, I can now think about using text. So I'm going to go to my text icon here. I'm going to make sure that my text, first of all, is not too big, so I'm going to bring it down to 12. I can choose the colour of my text, so I'm going to let's go for a white. I'm going to press OK. And then I can choose the typography that I want to use. What am I going to use? Let me just use anything. I think I'm going to just use the Calistoga. And obviously you can change things here, the boldness, italic, and so on. I'm then going to, on the surface, now that my type tool, my text tool is selected, I'm going to click on my background, and then I'm going to hold down in order to create a box where my text will appear. I'm then going to write my name. And if I then want to change the colour of that name, or if I want to make it bigger, if I try to change it like this, nothing's going to happen. So I need to highlight my text, and then I'm able to kind of change the size or change the colour. I'm going to keep it for white. And that's how I do my type or my text. When I'm finished with that, it's really important that you press this little tick button. If you don't press that tick button, you're gonna struggle to do anything else after this. If you're unhappy with this, or you just want to get rid of it, you can press this little circle with the cross in it, the cancel. So I'm just going to press the tick because I like it. If I want to move that, I just go up here to this icon here, which is the move tool. Click on that, and then I can move it around, or I can change the size of it, and so on. Yeah. If I hold down shift as well whilst I'm doing this, that way it will kind of lock it so it doesn't stretch it in one direction too much. Then I have to press the tick again once I'm done. So that's how you create text. Now, if I want to create a rectangle, I can use the rectangle tool here. I click and I drag, and then what it will show you is a nice white box, and then a really thin red line is hidden underneath this blue line. If I want to change those, I go up here, I change what the fill is. If I don't like any of these colours, I can again go to this gradient map, and I can choose the colour in which I want it to be. I think I'm going to go for a sort of green colour. I'm going to press OK, and then that will change the inside colour. Then if I want it to have an outline, I can go to this colour. I can choose a colour for the outline. Maybe I'll just go for white, and then I can choose the thickness of that outline here. So I'm going to go for I could go for a very thick outline, or I can just have a really, really thin one. But I'm going to have no outline because personally I'm not a massive fan of outlines. And if I want to get rid of that outline, I'll just go to this box here, where it's a white box with a red cross going through it. So that means that I won't have a stroke or an outline of the box. Good. Okay, Now that I've done that, the other thing that I could always do, which has very similar instructions, if I go back over here, hold this down, I can do an ellipse. An ellipse is just a circle. So I click and I drag and I can create that ellipse. And then I can change what it's filled with, so I might fill it with red. Yeah. And again, I can choose the outline of it, I can choose the thickness of it. I might even choose whether in which here, if it's a dotted line or whether it's just a normal line. But I'm not going to have a stroke on the outside of my circle. Now that I've done my ellipse and I've done my rectangle and I've done my text, which are 3 things, I want to point something out here about the layers. Every time I've created something, you'll notice that a new layer has been created. If, for example, I move my ellipse, which I've just created, behind the rectangle layer, if it will let me, give me a sec, let's wait for this, and I put it here, notice how on the screen it's now gone behind that rectangle. That's because that's what layers are. Layers are essentially one thing in front of the other, and you can keep jiggling and moving these around. At the moment, this is my background and it's been locked. I can even move that. So if I unlock by double clicking, I can bring that to the front. Ooh, ignore that. I can move that to the front and that will cover all the other things that I've created, or I can move it back and keep it there. If I want something to just be temporarily out of the way, or I just don't want to see it, I can also click this little eye. So at the moment I've got it next to my type, so if I click that, that will hide Sam, so I don't have to see it when I'm working on something else. If I want to relock this, I just use the little lock here, and then that will make that locked again. The other thing I can do is if I want to create another layer, I can always go down here and I can click create a new layer, and that will just bring another layer up, and I can put that anywhere. But because there's nothing in that layer, I'm not going to be covering anything up. So I might put something like a shape that's opacitated and it might overlay on something else. If I don't want that layer, I can always go back down here and click on the bin to delete that layer and press yes. Okay, so that's layers. So always have your eye on this because this tells you a lot of information, but we'll go through a little bit more, and it's a bit of trial and error. So we've done our rectangle, we've done our circle, we've done some type, and we've done our background. The other things that we can do is our pen tool, our curvature tool, and use of our rubber and our brush. So I'll go through that quickly. So if we're just using our pen tool is very similar to something that we use in Illustrator, where we just simply click and we sort of create a dot to dot. And what that does is it starts to create a shape. You can start to sort of create, but it's very linear. Each of the sides are very hard, like that. And if you'll notice that shape, that layer is behind Sam and it's behind the rectangle, so Sam is still in front. So if I wanted to actually cover Sam, I can just move that up and then it's covering Sam, and that shape's there. And again, I can change what it's filled with, so I could choose whether it actually has a blue, whether it's yellow, and so on. I'm going to have yellow because I think yellow is quite cool. Very primary choice of colours here, other than the green. And that's how in which I can create another tool. The other thing I can do is I can create a curved shape, so a curvature tool. So I use this curvature tool, and again I'm just doing a dot to dot, but what happens is after a while it starts to curve itself, so you can create a sort of curvy shape. I'm going to create a sort of like bean-like shape. And that's another way in which you can make a shape. Again, it's behind the rectangle on my layers, so if I want that to be in front, I just move that on top of the rectangle like that. And that's how I create a sort of curved shape. And again, I can change what's inside of it. I can change if it's got an outline. I might choose that it has no fill and it's just an outline. Let's do that. Let's give it a yellow outline. Let's change the thickness of that. So there's another one of my shapes, and it's good because they're all currently in different layers. And what I could start doing at this point is I can start to actually name these different layers. So I might call this layer red circle. I like the name Sam. I might call this yellow block. Might call this yellow outline. And then I'll call this green rectangle. Cool. So that's how in which I can use those different tools. The other one that I'm going to the last two that I'm going to point out to you is the brush tool. And the brush tool is pretty self-explanatory. All you need to know is if you want to use the brush tool, you need to create a layer. So the moment it's coming up with like a cancel sign or a no you can't do this sign, and I can't click anywhere or make any marks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new layer, and then with my brush tool I'm just going to go up here at the top hand side, and I'm going to just change the size, so I can choose the size of my brush and I can choose how hard the edges are. And that way you can create a brush mark. But it's really important that you create that layer in order to start using that brush tool. Good, that's another one, that's our brush tool. And then the last one is our rubber. So with our rubber, which is here, you essentially want to pick the layer that you want to rub out. So I might want to rub out this green, a bit of this green layer. And it's just a case, again, a bit like the brush tool. You come up here, you can change the hardness, you can change the size of it, and then you can brush out anything from that layer. Yeah, so I might brush out a bit, rub out a bit of that green rectangle. Okay, so if for example you're at this point where if I'm clicking on this and it's giving me this sort of circular shape, again saying that I can't do it, all you need to do is you need to go to that layer, you need to right click on that layer and then just go up to rasterize layer, which means you can then work on that layer. So I might just now rub out a bit of this yellow. Oh, sorry, it's this one, in order to do that.